Have you ever asked yourself, what am I going to be wearing today? Chaos Marines ask themselves that very same question before every mission. Am I going to wear mother and child, or a holy man whom I've convinced God isn't real? It is autumn and religion is just so out of season. Mother and child it is. Today we are painting flayed skin, a Chaos Marine's favorite accessory. Welcome, traveler. My name is Blake, and this is Love, Death, and Dice. If you're painting Chaos armies, sooner or later you'll need to paint some flayed skin. I'd like to share my quick and easy recipe with you. I've pulled aside a couple Chaos Knight bits to explain this process. You probably don't want to do flayed skin on something so big, it just makes demonstrating easier. Firstly, what kind of flesh we painting? What shade of accessory do you want? I'd like a warm and freshly torn look. I mainly use this recipe for my Night Lords. And if the flesh ain't fresh, that means they haven't unalived anybody in a while, and that's a bad look for an Astraman. Take your mini and give it a prime. Lately, I've been using Stynoreze Black through my airbrush for the smoothest effect. Next, airbrush the piece in shadow flesh to serve as the darkest areas. With a solid coat of that on, take note of where the folds in the skin are. Using tan flesh, airbrush from a direction that best catches those folds. Keep in mind that a zenithal won't work unless there's a face to catch that paint. For these pieces in particular, a 45 to 90 degree angle works best to catch those raised areas. Keep this lighting direction in mind when you paint the rest of the model. If it doesn't match the flesh is gonna look pretty out of place. God, I am gonna say flesh in this tutorial more than the Eyes Wide Shut movie. Both of these previous steps were achieved with an airbrush. However, if you have the time and a smoother hand, you can use a brush to achieve a similar result. I'd stress picking up one of those cheap airbrush compressor combos for stuff like this. You just can't beat the smoothness of an airbrush, especially on organic elements. Let's further darken those recesses and redden up the overall piece. Using Flesh Wash, I applied an even coat over everything and then dabbed a small amount onto the creases between folds and where the skin and contact points between other materials meet. Take a break and let that dry. Play some Sifu. It's my third day in a row trying to unlock the Drive outfit, and I suspect there will be many more days to come. Get a palette out and drop on some shadow flesh. Using a fine brush, line your edges and highlight folds. I don't try to be smooth with this. I apply the paint unevenly, often scratching it onto the surface. Using tan flesh and an even finer brush, I apply the paint the same way within the previous highlight, really selling that tattered look and torn texture. You can end things here if you want a dried out skin look, but we're looking for some wetness. Fresh blood is a liquid, and it tends to stain things, so be sure to paint the areas around the flesh before applying any blood. Masking with liquid latex is your best friend here. This is exactly how I achieved the separate gradients on the skin coat and the armor of my Primus Apothecary. Cleaning up liquid latex is a lengthy endeavor, but it's a heck of a lot faster than brushing on those fine gradients. With the areas around the skin painted, we can move on to adding blood. For this purpose, I like two paints: Dark Crimson Gloss and Blood for the Blood God. I use crimson to represent old blood, and the wet layers of dermis opposite the top layer of skin. I paint this on all the reverse sides of the skin as a flat color. On most models, you won't clearly see it, but when you catch it, the skin will no longer appear as one monotone tan material. I also dab this glossy paint on various parts of the skin, especially near the contact points where we applied the shading of Flesh Wash. For a brighter, fresher blood, dab Blood for the Blood God along all of the edges of the skin, conveying that this piece was torn from a larger source. The finishing flare on this very upsetting garment is a touch of splatter. Grab a toothbrush and dip it into the glossy red of your choice, and flick it onto the model. This will create webs and dots of glossy blood across the flesh. You can even dab and drag the toothbrush onto the flesh for unique patterns. How much of this effect depends on your taste. Though I will say there is a point where you can overdo it with the spatter and it starts to overshadow all of the other good work you've done on the model. Which is a shame when you're right at the finish line and have wrapped up your flesh. Skin, especially when it's worn as an accessory, is challenging to paint. I think this recipe is simple and provides the key ingredients that make miniature skin feel believable. Hopefully this video makes that process a little less daunting and gives you a jumping off point for your projects. Until next time, glam it the f up and wear that mother and child. It's a f up thing to say. Happy painting!